In safety-critical software, there are failures you simply cannot afford. Not unlikely, not low probability, unacceptable by definition. It doesn't matter how improbable the scenario is. If the consequence is severe enough, you design for it. You design around it. Actually, the probability is almost beside the point. Most businesses don't think about risks that way. They estimate probabilities, score impact, and decide what's worth worrying about. That framework works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the wheels come off. Standard risk management is built on a simple equation. Probability times impact equals risk score. If the probability is low enough, the risk gets deprioritized, sometimes ignored entirely. That's not irrational. Resources are limited. You can't design for every possible failure. But here's the structural problem. Probability is the thing we are worst at estimating, especially for failure scenarios that haven't happened yet, and especially in systems we've been running long enough to assume they are fine. And there is a second problem. Some failure modes don't behave proportionally. A low probability event with a catastrophic consequence doesn't average out. It just happens once and the damage is done. Safety critical engineering recognized this as a long time ago, and it built a different framework around it. The two core tools in functional safety analysis are FMEA, failure mode and effects analysis, and FTA, fault tree analysis. Before I explain what they are, let me explain what they do. FMEA starts with a question. What can fail? Not what has failed, not what usually fails, what can fail, systematically, exhaustively, without stopping until you have named everything. FTA works in reverse. You start with an undesired outcome and trace backwards what combination of events would cause this to happen. Both tools share the same underlying discipline. Anticipate failure before it occurs, systematically, without optimism, without the assumption that because it hasn't happened, it won't. Now, apply that to your business. What are the failure modes of your most critical customer relationship? What's the fault tree behind your most important integration? What combination of events would stop your operations completely? And have you actually traced that back? Most business risk processes don't ask these questions at this level of depth. They check the box, score it, and move on. What's missing is the discipline of naming every failure mode first, before scoring, before prioritizing. On to the second principle. In safety-critical systems, every critical component has a defined fail-safe state. Not an optimal state, a safe state. When something goes wrong, and the assumption is that something will go wrong, the system doesn't crash, doesn't escalate, doesn't do unexpected things. It goes to a known, controlled, predictable state. And here's the key point. This is designed in advance, not improvised when the failure happens. The fail-safe state is an architectural decision made when the system is being built, not when it's already breaking. Fail-safe is also independent of probability. You don't design a fail-safe state because you think the failure is likely. You design it because if the failure happens, regardless of how unlikely, you need to know exactly what the system will do. The question isn't, will this fail? The question is, when this fails, what happens next? The business translation isn't metaphorical. It's structural. What is your organization's safe state when a critical system fails? When your most important integration breaks, when the supplier you depend on stops delivering, when the regulation changes and your product is no longer compliant overnight? Most organizations don't have an answer, not because they haven't thought about it, but because they never designed for it. So when it happens, they are caught off guard. Fail-safe thinking in business means building architecture that keeps options open, avoiding lock-in where the cost of switching becomes prohibitive, building interoperability in from the start rather than retrofitting it later, and treating dependencies as risks to be managed, not just as conveniences to be relied on. Standard risk management asks, how likely is this to fail? Safety-critical engineering asks a different question. When this fails, and at some point it will, what does the system do next? Most businesses have never answered that question, not because it's hard, because nobody asked it. None of this requires perfection. That's a point that often gets lost. Safety-critical engineering doesn't eliminate all risks. It identifies which failure modes are unacceptable and designs specifically for those. Everything else is managed within an appropriate cost and effort framework. The same applies to business. You don't need to design for every failure. You need to know which failures you cannot afford and be honest that probability doesn't make them acceptable. A low probability catastrophic failure is still a catastrophic failure. Knowing which risks fall into that category and having designed for them before they happen is the difference between business that survives a crisis and one that doesn't. Where in your business would a failure cause chaos? And have you actually designed for that?